is Anarchast. Hey, peaceful people. Welcome to another edition of Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. I have a really interesting guest coming on today. His name's Ron from Firearms. And we're going to talk about killing people. But the really important thing to say right off the bat is we're always defensive. We do not initiate violence ever. But it's incredibly important as very reasonable, honest, non-violent people that we know how to defend ourselves. So we're going to get into a lot of that today. We've never actually really got into this subject before. It's probably because I don't like even talking about violence. But I think there is times, actually I train my own family. I have a mixed martial arts trainer come to our house. We actually do have firearms in the house. But I think it's really important as anarchists, as people who really want freedom, I think it's really important to know how to defend yourself. So we have a really great guest. He's coming up from Illinois, of all places, the gun-free zone of Chicago area, Ron from Firearms. And we're going to get into a lot of things. But the first thing I always have to ask Ron is, how did you become an anarchist?
How did I become an anarchist? I wasn't blessed with a family that kind of got me into it. It was kind of a long research project for me, if you will. It started, first tentative steps were taking when I met a young libertarian out on the rifle range, Army Ranger, and he gave me a book after a weekend of training that was by Vin Suprenowitz. Are you familiar with Vin? Vin is a editor at the Las Vegas Review-Journal in Nevada, and a libertarian author, and he wrote a book. At that time, it was Send in the Waco Killers. And it touched on all the major topics, and that was kind of the first part that really rattled me and got me to look at the drug interdiction prohibition in a completely new light. And then after that, obviously, you get Ron Paul, and it's a natural conclusion when you start looking at who's doing what to whom, and you realize, wait a minute, there's a better way to do things. You don't have to point guns at people's heads to get them to cooperate with you. And if you do, you've got a much bigger problem than having to point a gun at a person's head and make them do what you want them to do. So, especially in the political arena.
Well, just kind of politics is violence.
Yeah. Yeah, they go hand in hand, don't they?
Yeah. But one of the reasons I want to have you on is because you're very technical about, and very straight up. We just went through like a half hour. You just brought me through you've got this whole training course. Really interesting stuff. So why don't you tell people, for example, anarchists who they don't initiate violence, but how they should be aware of their surroundings and how they should be ready to defend themselves.
Sure. Well, as an anarchist, you kind of adhere to the NAP, the non-aggression principle, and that really blends into the justifiable use of lethal force. There's a general overlying concept there, and that is that you're generally justified in the use of lethal force when there's a reasonable fear of immediate or otherwise unavoidable danger or death or serious bodily injury to the innocent. And all those kind of have to be in place there. Reasonable would be a group of your peers would say he was in a situation that he had no other way out of this, and he was in fear, immediate fear of his life. And because of this, and he thought life, limb potentially being removed from him, and he was innocent, he didn't instigate this thing, then you're reasonably secure in being able to defend yourself. And I think that's where all this goes, is you can't delegate your security to somebody else. Call the cops, call for pizza, see who arrives first. That's the kind of the old.
Well, you actually can if you have a bodyguard, which actually is quite cheap down in Mexico. But if you don't have a bodyguard,
sure, if you don't have a bodyguard, it's going to be substantially more difficult for you. If you're not one of the politically elite that are siphoning off of that system and protecting themselves with your money, then yeah, that's certainly easier.
You just walked me through this whole armory that you have there. Why don't you let people know just like the basics of self-defense.
How do you mean?
Like we just walked through, like you talked me through all these terms I've never even seen before. Just sort of walk through just briefly, be aware of your surroundings, higher ground, all that kind of stuff that we were talking about.
Sure. Well, I guess, the most important thing is one of the things we spoke of previously was that killing enabling aspect, which is the most overlooked aspect of personal protection. Whether you're doing it with hand-to-hand, with knife, any weapon, a knife, a glass, whatever you have, firearm, the biggest mental hurdle to overcome, it's not necessarily the training as far as learning how to use the tool, it's actually being able to kill somebody. And there's a term for that. It's not my term. It's not my school's term. It's called killing enabling. And being able to actually kill somebody requires training. Unless you're very gifted, select 3% of the population that doesn't have the same moral hangups that the vast majority, the other 97% do. So the killing enabling, that's what the military does. That's what the police do. Going through brutalization, obedience to orders, all that stuff rolls into it. And you and I were talking about Colonel Dave Grossman, his book on killing, his website, killology.com, getting in to understand what exactly goes into preparing a human being to kill. And there are some very serious psychological repercussions that happen if you don't approach that correctly. Hence, you see our young men and women coming back from overseas. They're committing suicide at an atrocious rate, receiving counseling and drugs, and even that's not helping. And there's a reason for that, I believe.
That's a whole other sort of thing, is the whole military giant mess. A lot of people get into it because they think they're defending their freedom, and right. They go over and kill kids. It's terrible. But let's get more into it. We just talked for like a half hour about. Sorry, I just bumped my mic here. We just talked for like a half hour about like all these sort of technical things. So talk a little bit more about these issues on how people can prepare themselves for when, if, hopefully not, but if unfortunately you are involved in a situation where it's life or death, how you can prepare yourself. Well,
there's a lot of things you can do in the training, whatever it is, whether it's the hand-to-hand, whatever arm technique you're using for contact weapons or firearms. Obviously, you should go out and get good quality training from quality instructors. But the one thing you must absolutely have in place, as we mentioned, is the ability to kill. So everything else is superfluous at that point. If you don't have that in, you can have the world's finest training. You can have the best equipment. You can have the most shiny knives, shoot the sharpest edges. You can have the best guns, best holster, best ammo, all that in place. If you're not killing enabled and you don't have the training for that, then it really doesn't matter. Everything else before then, it's over, because somebody's going to die, and it's not going to be the guy who's trying to kill you if he is killing enabled, i.e. A criminal who is out there looking to kill you. So the training aspect is a lot of it. You can learn on your own. You really can. It's not rocket science. You can get in there. You can get into, for instance, like our armory. You can read books. You can start to set the background for your education, so you can understand this, come to terms with it. But when it comes to killing enabling, then you actually have to get out there and then see what violence looks like, feel what that violence looks like. And we were talking about this a little bit previous to the show. That's that reality being the keyword based training, where you actually get out with firearms, knives, et cetera, against a live human being, not a paper, plastic, or steel target, a dynamic, moving human being who has its own will, who wants to impose upon you, and then learning how to deal with that, and then operating under that chaos, that high stress. And we didn't even talk about it in the previous call, but we get into the factors when you do get into a lethal force encounter. You have an adrenaline dump. It's called, you talk about a sympathetic nervous system reaction, where the body receives this, and then all kinds of survival instincts take place, and your body starts to gear for that fight or flight response that you've heard so much about. With the perception narrowing, your hands don't work really well. You don't have that fine-tuned motor skills, anymore, that fine trigger pressure, can't write very well. And depending on how stressed, how elevated your heart rate is, how much adrenaline you have in your body, things will just continuously start to fall apart the higher and higher up you get there. There's a very fine zone in between and around 145 beats per second. If you get above that, it's going to start turning out real bad for you. Too much about that.
I think this is really important. When I was younger, I actually I was very small, so I was always picked on in public schools. And my dad actually put me into first karate and then boxing. And I learned a lot from that, and I've actually learned that knowing self-defense is a very critical and important part of being a good human being, because the people who don't know self-defense, they actually will rely on things like government. They'll say, "Oh, I can't protect myself. I need the government." One of the main things to be a true anarchist, a true freedom, a person who really wants to be free, is to be able to defend yourself. And I've learned through life as well, just through going through life, I'm 44 years old now, that there is sometimes situations that you get into and you don't want to, you don't initiate it, but they just sort of gravitate around you sometimes, hopefully not very often and hopefully never. But when they do, it's really good to be prepared. And one of the things that you're talking about is you actually do training. You were telling me before that it's almost like a real life situation. It seems like it's really dangerous, and you have to get through that situation. I think that's an excellent training. And if I was there in Illinois, which thank God I'm not, but I would definitely go with my family for like a weekend or whatever you do there, and bring them through it. Only if they want to. I wouldn't force them, of course. Sure. If they're scared or whatever, I'd say, okay, you're not ready for it yet. But I would just sort of explain to them, in life, there is sometimes some bad people. And sometimes things get a little crazy. Sometimes, hopefully never, but sometimes. And you just need to be prepared. So that's really cool that you have this sort of a program where you do those sort of things.
Yeah, thank you. You're absolutely right. Violence in life is very rarely the answer. But the important thing to understand about that is that when violence is the answer, there is no other answer that will do. And if you're not ready for that, that's when you're going to be in trouble. It's I don't own a gun because I want to use it. I own that gun. I carry that gun because if I have to use it, it's much better to have it on my body than not have it with me. And then I have that opportunity. It's just being prepared. It's just kind of common sense thing for anybody who wants to run their own lives, not have it governed by somebody else, to, as you said, be able to defend yourself, your family, your business, your community, your neighborhood, to be able to get out there and not depend on somebody else. And, that dependence, when you really think about it, is really backwards, a little bit sick, because you're being extorted to pay for it. Right? And then they just continue to extort you along the way with more taxes, more fines, more tickets, more regulations, etc. All supposedly in the name to keep you safe. And it's nothing that anybody can't do. We as humans intuitively recognize that we need to work together with other people. And there's always bad people out there, but why in God's name would you want to give authority to bad people out there? Just like you and I, they're not gods. They're just people like you and I, put their pants on the same way every day, to be able to extort you to get what they want out of you, when you can do a lot of this stuff all on your own. And I would argue you can do it all on your own.
Oh, absolutely. Actually, the biggest threat to most people's lives in the U.S. is the police. And then the government, of course, who steals half their money every year. But I'm not saying go out and shoot cops.
No, of course not. No. Again, we go back to the NAP. We go to justifiable use of lethal force, which isn't a defensive situation. But then you have to be able to do it. Right.
And that's what we're sort of trying to say here is, if you don't know how to defend yourself, whether it be physically, which you should also always learn, whether just a few martial arts or boxing classes is all it really takes. Learn how to use firearms, but don't use it, don't initiate violence. And Of course, government and police are violence, but we're not going to win by initiating violence against them. That's how we lose, because that's their game. But always know how to defend yourself. So if you don't know how to defend yourself, like I said, it's a few sort of courses, a few training classes. You can learn how to punch. You can learn how to deflect blows against your face very easily. And then firearms. It's unfortunate, again, that we have to know these things, but there's a lot of communist, statist, fascist, police, government out there who want to initiate violence against us. And it's really important to know how to defend yourself. And so that's one of the reasons I want to have Ron on was he has a full course. He's incredibly passionate about it. Actually, Cody Drummond of the Peacekeeper app just recently hooked up with you. Is that correct?
That's correct. Cody and I, our business, are working together with Peacekeepers now. We're trying to set up a deal for his people so they can get access into the armory that I took you into, and our people can start getting access to Peacekeeper to start building up those neighborhoods, the communities, et cetera, et cetera. So it's, really love that show, obviously.
Yeah, no. Peacekeeper app, if you didn't see it, we'll put the link down below. Amazing. I've got it on my phone right now. I'm trying to get everyone I know on it. It's a way of just a self-protection. When you have problems, there's always going to be problems in life. That's for sure. I don't think I know anyone who hasn't had some problems. You just hit the button on your phone now, and you can have all your friends and family come there immediately and know exactly where you are. So it's amazing. But as Ron's saying, there's the next level. If it ever gets that bad, you have to be prepared. It's unfortunate, but that's the way life is. And so you need to be able to be prepared. That's actually the key, right? Because I've known some people, my own, I don't even want to say what happened. Someone got raped. I was talking to a friend who explained why that happened, and he said she just didn't know that was even possible. She didn't have it in her head that that was possible. And so it's always just this little level of preparedness. He actually called it, that they have this term like red, and they have these colors.
Awareness, right.
Yeah, talk a little bit about that. I think it's important.
It's been different titles given to it: the color code of mental awareness, the color code of mental preparation for a fight. I've heard that it originated with the airborne. Jeff Cooper was a famous school gun site down in Arizona, talked about it, but basically what he did is they tied these colors, easy to remember colors, with mental states. Originally it was meant for being ready to fight. So for instance, color code white is you're in complete oblivion. This is what, unfortunately, a vast majority of people are living in, riding on the train, riding on a bus, sitting on a park bench, reading a newspaper, whatever it may be. You're unaware bad things can happen to good people. A step above white is yellow. And in yellow, what you're doing is you're just consciously aware of your surroundings. We call it situational awareness. It's not paranoia. It's not looking for trouble. It's just, hey, something is looking out of the ordinary here. This guy kind of is looking at me funny, whatever it may be. But it's being tuned into your environment. This all gets around that perception, being mentally prepared. And then you work up your way up there to keying in on a specific thing. Maybe a guy comes into the restaurant with an overcoat on, and now you go from that yellow to an orange, and then he pulls out a shotgun. Now you're in condition red. You've already planned these responses in orange. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to smash out the window or run the family through the back door, or whatever it may be. And you make your decisions from there. And then red, you're actually fighting. And then we get into black, which is where usually you end up when you start at white and you're not ready. You're not transitioning from yellow to orange or red, or from yellow to red immediately. You have no idea what's going on, and you're in the middle of it, and you had no idea this was coming, and now you're in condition black, and it's pretty much downhill for you from there.
Yeah, so, and what I learned was, I didn't know this before, I've always been sort of in yellow my whole life. I've always just sort of been aware. But if you're in white, what you're describing as the white area, which is complete oblivion, you're just not even aware that it's possible. You can't go to that a red or a black area, you just can't even get there. Your brain just sort of seizes up. So it's really important that people are aware that of these things. Just be aware of them and do some basic training, because just like in sports, just like anything, if you've never tried or practiced anything, you can't really do it when it comes down to a really serious situation. So that's why training is so important. So get basic self-defense, fighting training. Hopefully you'll never have to use it, but again, you have that in your brain. And one of the things I've learned, actually, this is sort of maybe a weird thing, is I've done so many of these things throughout my life that when I walk around anywhere in the world, and I've gone through all kinds of weird situations, people can just kind of sense, because you have this sort of sense of confidence when you know how to defend yourself. And so if there is a few bad people around, they might be thinking, oh, I'm going to do something with this person. If you have this backing of knowing and confidence in self-defense, whether it be with firearms or just physically, they can actually sense it. It's an actual energy that you have about you. So a few times in my life, I've been in, just off the top of my head, I was in Turkey once, and the Russian mob wanted to kill me for some weird reason. And they said, we're going to kill you. And I was like, yeah, go ahead, try. And they all busted out laughing, and then we went out all night. But if I was a typical person who was in the white zone, who didn't know how to defend themselves, I would have probably been like shaking and shivering. And you know what, when you're kind of like that, people kind of want to attack you. There's something about that, right? When you seem really scared and defenseless, it's almost like an instinct for people who like to attack people. They target you, right? So it's
you're absolutely right. Yeah, and you bring up a lot of great points in there. We've covered a lot, from the peacekeeper to the color code. Interestingly enough, we were talking about the color code, and before the show, you and I were talking about Boyd's decision-making process, the OODA loop: observation, orientation, decision, action. And you now tie that in with the color code, because there's a direct link. It's a symbiotic link with the color code and Boyd's decision-making process, the OODA loop. You said, look, if you're not aware, you don't see it coming, right? You're out of that observation, that perception ability, and you have no idea what's coming at you. And you were talking just now about how that appears to the predators in our world. And you're absolutely right. There have been studies done on that. They've interviewed felons and people who have gone out, mugged, raped, and murdered, and they said, hey, why did you pick this person? What was this? And on key, you're right there. Hey, these guys are vulnerable. They look, nobody, no animal on the face of the planet is going to pick out the biggest, baddest, equal animal it can if it needs to eat. It's going to pick out the weakest thing, the weakest link out there, and take it down the best it can. It'll isolate it. It'll try to ambush it, etc. So, yeah, sure, if you go out, you're oblivious, you're drunk, out of your mind, and you're not paying attention to anything, whatever it can be that can interfere with your mental balance, you betcha, you can easily make yourself a target to the predator.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really important, if you're an anarchist out there, to get some sort of training if you haven't done it. I'm so glad that I've done all these things in my life. I need more firearms training. So we actually have a gun range here in Acapulco. I'm going to take the family out here sometime in the next few weeks. But if I was in Illinois, I would definitely go to Pulse Firearms. Amazing guy, Ron. He's doing great things, trying to just help people to be prepared to defend themselves. So Ron, why don't you let people know where they can get more information on yourself and anything else you want to let them know?
Sure. They can visit our website, www.pulsefirearmstraining.com, or just look up Pulse Firearms Training in your browser, and it'll take you straight to our homepage. We have the About page. You can look me up there, and obviously contact me directly at silentbob@pulsefirearmstraining.com.
That's great. So definitely check it out. If you live anywhere near that area, check it out. You can just go to his website and check it out. I think it's really important. And I've said that many times, so I don't have to say it anymore. But learn how to defend yourself. As anarchists, we have to take responsibility for our own safety. And hopefully it never happens, but it does sometimes happen. So just be prepared. Don't be in that white zone. Be in the yellow zone, awareness. Be aware of your surroundings, and then also have some sort of training to protect yourself if something does happen. And like I just pointed out, the more that you are prepared for those things and the more that you have confidence in your own self-protection, the less problems you have. So a lot of interesting things to think about, and definitely check out Pulse Firearms. So that's it for Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. Peace, love, and anarchy.
This is Anarchast.